Good evening. Welcome to Insights. Tonight's Insight Show is the first part of a mini-series of the 2004 VFP's National Convention. That's Veterans for Peace. We'll be showing you different aspects of it, things that went on, workshops, and then basically an all-around picture, maybe the last show. And we might even have something about behind the scenes. But at the convention, and basically the key man running the convention is a very frequent guest of ours, Lee Vanderland. Lee.
Hi, Jesse.
Good to have you back again.
Thank you.
And I don't think you came up for air the whole 4 days.
Well, it was 4 days, and about 40 days before that, it was really intensive effort to put it together. We're pleased that it did come together. It really was a great event. We had Emerson College for 4 days, Faneuil Hall for an evening, the Boston Public Library at Copley Square, where we had our banquet. We had overwhelming attendance. We expected 200, 250. We had 400 people attend the convention.
Yeah, they were coming from all across the country. Some of the regulars, and I really look forward to it because some of the people I don't see, but that have been on trips like Salvador, working efforts in Salvador to Cuba or whatever. And the only time I get to see them is at the National Convention and share some time. But we were a little hectic, didn't have much time to spend with other people, being here in Boston.
And that's partially why we wanted to record every session for our own use later, and taped every workshop. We had 36 workshops over Thursday and Friday that week. It was 2 weeks ago. July 22 to 25. It was just the weekend before the Democratic National Convention. So we thought we had great timing. People got great airfares coming in. We had people from all over the country, 3 from Alaska, a couple from Hawaii. We had 3 DNC representatives that then went to the convention the following week, took our message there. And we feel it was a really resounding success.
Well, it actually overlapped into the convention because a lot of us did go to the Sheraton for there was a hearing of Veterans for Kerry.
It was the first ever Veterans Caucus sponsored by the Democratic National Party.
And we were invited. Veterans for Peace was invited into the convention. And they let us have our banners. I don't know if this one here, but we did have a large banner walking into the bank. The main room was the banner, "Bring the Boys Home Now." And they allowed that. They gave me extra space. The video on there was quite a thing. And even though we're 503C, we don't endorse any one candidate. We can't endorse one. But yet, I felt a strong feeling at the convention of support for Kerry, and that he would have a understanding of the veterans' experience in combat, et cetera, and have more of an inclination of bringing us, having a strategy to bring us out of Iraq.
Might say that, we had every aspect of politics represented there. We had Nader supporters. Mr. Nader did attend the convention for a workshop. He did a book signing for us, and he was there on Friday. And of course, there's several aspects of Kerry supporters, anybody but Bush supporters. Just a good range of political awareness there.
Well, I felt what I was getting from the guys there, that they felt that Kerry, because we took over his office some years ago, and he made him change his mind. It was a shipment of arms to Salvador, and after 2 hours listening to us, he realized he'd voted incorrectly, and he was going to make a change. And that's being able to make a change sometimes, of changing your voters, so is admitting your mistake. And that to me is more of a man than someone who will never admit their mistake. Then again, he said, "Why didn't you take the guy's office down the hall?" And I said, "What do you want us to get arrested and go to jail?" He said, "Well, I get my hands on you," but that was, so I'm not saying I totally 100%. It might be, again, voting for the lesser of the two evils, but I think it's a possibly more of an exit strategy. And then also, I remember I asked Scott Ritter. People know the show we did in Scott Ritter, the head of the weapons inspection team, and he was articulating each one, about each one of them, and there's sort of a Tweedledee and a Tweedledum syndrome. Until I asked him the question, "Come on, you're making the vote sound awful. Which one would you want us to vote for?" And he came right out with John Kerry.
Well, that's to many of us an obvious choice. We did honor Scott Ritter with an award as calling the shot about a year ago. He said the weapons of mass destruction were gone when I was there, and they're gone now, and that evidently is what happened. So again, we've seen the mentality that supports the war. We want to bring the troops home, and that's our intent.
Right, but let's get back to the convention. We can get off that so easily. Back again, what I wanted was, I hope there were one show, maybe even two shows at the Faneuil Hall night.
That was a memorable event. We had not only great speakers, but we had at least 10 returning Iraq veterans.
That was the key.
Women and men.
Right.
And they were incredible.
What was incredible
their testimonies, their statements.
What was incredible, was historic, was at Faneuil Hall, July 23rd, the founding of IVAW, Iraq Veterans Against the War. Do you think I think one of them was from Yale. He might write a speech saying something like, how do we ask the last young man to die for a mistake? You know, it's one of these guys, but you're all young guys, and it's great to see, because in a way it's good for Veterans for Peace, because you can see they're going to just build a whole new young group to take our place, because we're not getting any younger. Well, you're not.
Well, we might say that, you know, certain circumstances and wars are making veterans who take our place, and we'd be just as pleased if the movement could go away someday.
Yes, our purpose is to abolish having veterans.
But briefly, the convention theme was what you saw behind us. If you see a big shot of the banner, "We the People, Defeating Militarism and the Politics of Fear." It was a excellent theme. We actually took off on last year's theme because we felt it was somewhere we wanted to go.
This is the banner that we brought from the...
It is, and we made this for Faneuil Hall.
Right. We the People, Defeating Militarism and the Politics of Fear. That was the theme of the convention.
And because it was Boston-centered and Faneuil Hall-centered, We the People would be a prominent theme, and so we used it, and it was highly successful. We had practically filled Faneuil Hall that Friday night. We were...
It's a packed house.
It was really good.
What I noticed was the emotional feelings that were there, ups and downs, like what have you. And it was a nice mix, because then we had, that one scene really got emotional, and then the singer came on. But it is an emotional group of veterans who have seen a lot of combat situations. That Faneuil Hall was a big event.
Yeah. Well, on this so-called mini-series we're trying to put together, we're going to start off with the plenary session that was held Thursday morning after our opening ceremony. We were in the theater at Emerson College, the new Tufte Performing Arts Center called the Semmel Theater. And we had Howard Zinn, Daniel Ellsberg, and Cynthia Enlow. They were all great speakers. They addressed the crowd and really brought the convention to a great start.
Well, that's good. This is going to follow this interview, folks. Pay attention. I was only able to put Daniel Ellsberg and Howard Zinn because of the hour space of the show. I plan on doing a whole women's show and using that one for that women's show on one of the women's workshops. So there'll be a whole show for that. There'll be a whole show. There's one for gays in the military. The one for... So we're going to be having this mini-series coming up for the next couple of months, because there are a lot of shows to put out there and a lot of information from the workshop, so you people will really look forward to getting this information, a lot relative to your position, and it talks about the draft, and the draft that they say is coming, and what have you, and see the position where women will be that. So stay tuned for this first part, which will be basically at the planetarium with Daniel Ellsberg, you know, from the Watergate and the Pentagon Papers, and from Howard Zinn, the author of the American History, the professor at BU, and they have a lot to say here that's really interesting. So thanks for watching Insights, and stay tuned.
Lost my job, joined the army to get an education, and I most surely did. Wanted to have some kind of steady job, lead a decent life, support me and my wife and kid. First I was based in Texas, then it was off to Germany, then they sent us to Iraq. So many ruined buildings, so many burned up bodies, twisted railroad tracks. We were sent off to Fallujah, told to keep the peace amidst such hunger and despair. I was only 21, didn't have a clue what I was doing there. Now they say the war is over and I'm back at home, here in the land of the free, and you're looking at the face of victory. You're looking at the face of victory. Patrolling through Fallujah, driving on the rubble, shattered pavement and shattered glass. They sent us on a search for weapons. We looked in every basement, never found a single barrel of gas. And when we saw the cities looted, as we watched the oil pipelines, it all began to seem so clear. We were fighting for Exxon, dying for Chevron. That's what we were doing here. They told us we'd be welcomed as troops of liberation. Once again they lied. We got shot at every day. Everywhere we went, a bunch of my buddies died. A rocket launcher hit my tank, started up a fire, blew my legs right off of me. Now you're looking at the face of victory. You're looking at the face of victory. I went back to Michigan. They put some plastic on my stumps and sent me on my way. Now I roll on down the city streets, looking at the people as they turn their eyes away. Down at the burn, they were talking about the government, how it's all a ruse, and I get a little madder every time I see the president smirking on the evening.
Howard Zinn is a well-known historian, playwright, and professor of political science. He's published 22 books and numerous articles. And perhaps his best-known book is The People's History of the United States. And maybe his memoir, You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train, A Personal History of Our Time. Howard was a combat veteran in the U.S. Air Force, a bombardier in World War II. He was active in the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War, against the war movement. His writing, his activism, and his supporting for peace, justice, and social change has made him a voice of conscience for America. He also warns us, the one thing that enables the authorities to deceive the public is to keep the public in a state of amnesia. Amnesia from thinking back to the history of war, violence, government deception, and media complicity. If more people knew something about the history of government deception, they would have questions about what they are hearing from the government and the media to justify this war. Please welcome Veterans of Peace member Howard Zinn.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I think this is the first time I've been able to attend a convention of the Veterans for Peace, so I always wanted to. Because as soon as I heard that there existed such an organization, immediately my heart leaped, and I thought, yeah, this is needed. So, put my watch down here, pretending that I care.
How'd it go, Smedley?
Putting on my glasses to pretend that I can see. How many people here are World War II veterans? World War II veterans are the toughest. No, I mean, do you know what I mean? I mean they're the toughest people. I mean, they're the toughest to talk to. No, really. I I mean, I don't mean the people sitting in this room, but you know, the other World War II veterans. I think everybody has had that experience, especially those of us who are World War II veterans, and when you talk to other, you know, because that, as we know, was the good war. Very hard for people to overcome that, you say. And so I'm especially grateful when I run into, and I'm doing that more and more, run into World War II veterans who now know that war is futile and disastrous. And I recently had the experience of being invited to the World War II memorial service in Washington, D.C. You know, you remember, it was in the news for a while. War memorials are wonderful things. Great occasions, you know, for people to come with their hats and, you know, and stuff. And so they invited me, which surprised me. I go, don't they know? I said, well, what is the topic that I'm supposed to talk on? And they said, war stories. I said, I'll come. I said, but I'm not going to tell war stories, because I just want to talk about my feelings about war. The guy said, okay, no problem. So I did. And I came and I talked in this tent to a bunch of people, and I said, you know, the reason I'm here is to honor friends of mine who died in the war. And I'm not here to remember World War II as a glorious war which should make everybody just anxious to go and be part of another greatest generation. Because I think that World War II, whatever moral core there was in it, and that's a very complicated story, the degree to which World War II was a moral war. Most difficult question ever had to grapple with. But whatever was true of World War II and whatever you can say about the morality of World War II, one thing is clear, and that is World War II has been used and abused and misused, and it's been made to stand in whatever goodness there was, or whatever morality there was in it. It's been made to stand for all the ugly wars that we have fought since then. And the glow of World War II has been cast over every miserable war that we have fought ever since the end of World War II. So I didn't want that war, you know, to be used, you know, in that way. And I feel that we as veterans, you know, it's just a peculiar thing, because you don't want to make a big deal of being a veteran. Well, yeah. But you want to make a little deal of being a veteran. By that I mean, after all, you know, there are veterans and there are veterans. You know, the fact that you're a veteran doesn't mean that you necessarily speak the truth, because there are veterans who speak lies. Remember Bush? The elder, the smarter? Well, the slightly smarter. Yeah. There are all sorts of veterans, yeah. And yet, yes, there's something to be a veteran and to have something special to say to people. And we are, I think, yeah, in a special position to talk about war in a way that has a little more weight to it than other people who speak about war. And I think we're in a position to, you know, talk, well, in a sense we're in a position to speak, as I did in Washington, for the dead, you know, who are not here to speak for themselves, speak for the people we knew who died and the people we didn't know who died in wars. We're in a position to speak for all those who were injured in wars and who are not speaking for themselves. And we're here even we have to speak for all the hidden casualties of war. You know, the people who come back and they're alive, and they don't have any apparent injuries. They have their arms and their legs, but they're in some way, their lives have been distorted by the war that they're in. And you know, and we're in a position to speak for those people, say something for them, because the people in Washington don't care about them. All those people who came back from Vietnam, and you know, of course some of them came back in wheelchairs, and some of you are in wheelchairs, and some of them came back without arms and legs and so on, and there are others who came back apparently whole, but not really whole. And I remember being startled when I read that statistic, which I'm sure most everybody knows, and which shocks you when you read it, that more veterans since the Vietnam War, more veterans have committed suicide than died in the war. You see, it's a shocking thought, you see. But and remember in the Gulf War, and remember how our authorities bragged about how few casualties we had in the Gulf, you know, a few hundred casualties and so on. But they, in the years, in the 10 years that followed the Gulf War, thousands of veterans of the Gulf War died, according to the Veterans Administration. Thousands were dead. These were young people. And 200,000 of the 600,000 Gulf War veterans, and this is according to VA figures, 200,000 applied for disability, and 150,000 of them were granted. So yeah, these are all the casualties of war. And we're also in a position, I think, although this is something that isn't done, really, it certainly isn't done by the military high brass, and it isn't done by the White House high brass, and, you know, to remind people not just of our casualties, but of the casualties on the other side, which we don't think of. We're not trained to think of, you know, and which in fact, and many of you maybe had the same experience I did, and when I was flying bombing missions, I was not aware, I didn't think about the human beings who were down there on the receiving end of these bombs. Simply didn't think about that. And when we can understand, those of us who have that experience can understand how soldiers can commit atrocities. Ordinary soldiers can commit atrocities and not think about what they're doing. But we're away from that now. We can think about it, and we can talk about it, and it's our duty to talk about the people on the other side who are the victims of our wars. So, something special, you know, that we need to do. And and of course, we're in a position to talk about the reality of war. And by the reality of war, I mean away from the abstractions, and away from the euphemisms, and away from the promises, and the war for democracy, a war for liberty, you know all those words, you know, that are used, and to confront people with, you know, this is what war is. This is what war is like. If any of you have not read Paul Fussell's books, you should. You probably don't need it, but you can recommend it to others. His book about World War I, The Great War in Modern Memory, and his book about World War II, Wartime, which brings the reader right up, readers who have not experienced war, you know, right up close, you know, to the reality of war. And, you know, so yeah, we're in a better position than most to challenge, you know, the claims about we're fighting, you know, for this and we're fighting for that. We're in a better position to expose the lies of the government, you know. I remember of all people, Kipling, the great imperialist, said but he acknowledged some things, you know. And at one point he wrote, I think, this little couplet: if any ask why we died, tell them because our fathers lied. I think we're in a position to talk to young people about patriotism. That is, and you see young people on television before they're going off, or when they're enlisting in the military, and the television reporter says, you know, how do you feel about that? They're great with their really intelligent questions. You know, how do you feel about the fact that you're about to die? You know, how do you feel about the fact that you're about to go into the, you know, military? And you hear young guys say, well, you know, I believe in fighting for my country. Well, we're in a position to explain to people and to talk gently to young people and to everybody about the difference between fighting for your country and fighting for your government. The difference between fighting for people, for human beings, and fighting for Halliburton, fighting for the profiteers, fighting for the war makers. Big difference. We're in a position to talk about patriotism and how patriotism does not mean simply going along with what your government does, but patriotism means supporting the principles for which your government is supposed to stand. I mean, that's the whole idea. That's what the democratic philosophy is, as expressed in the Declaration of Independence. Governments are artificial creations. Governments are not holy. Governments are set up, according to the Declaration of Independence, governments are set up by the people in order to bring about certain things: equality, equal right to life, liberty, pursuit, happiness. And when governments become destructive of those ends, the language of the Declaration, then it is the right of the people to alter or abolish the government. I think we can also, in a position to talk about heroism, because there's all this. World War II, of course, is the greatest generation, and we've been absolutely submerged in World War II nostalgia and the landings on D-Day and the Band of Brothers and all of that, you know. Somehow there's, you know, something about that, you know, which is sort of very troubling to anybody, you know, anybody who really thinks about what heroism is. For instance, I'm glad there's somebody here who is at the Democratic Convention. I won't get a chance to talk to you later, so I'll talk to you now. Just between you and me. I know you're going to have a great opportunity to talk to John Kerry. Yeah. And you might explain to him, because he's been emphasizing his military heroism, you know. And you might say, John, yes, there is such a thing as military heroism, and you showed that. But there's also such a thing as political heroism, moral heroism. You see, and that's what you know. And if you actually, not even beyond the question of morality, even from the point of pragmatism, of being practical, of just winning over people, of winning the presidency, if you would show some moral heroism, the people of the country would respond, and you would be elected easily. Well, I remember when I left the Air Force, I got this letter from General Marshall. Personal letter addressed to 16 million guys. and a few women who had been in the military. And a letter, kind of thanked me, congratulated me for being part of this great effort to win the war, and how now it was going to be a great new world. A world with, after all, 50 million people died in the war, the last sacrifice. It has to be a great new world. Well, as we know, it has not been a great new world. We've not seen the end of war. We have not seen the end of fascism. We've not seen the end of militarism. But it seems to me that what we are about, what we are trying to do, us veterans, non-veterans, all of us who gather today opposing the present war, we are trying finally to fulfill that promise that was made to us to create a world without war and with justice. Thank you.
The next speaker that we have is Cynthia Enlow. Cynthia is a research professor at Clark University, and she has chaired the Department of Government and Women's Studies programs and has had 3 Outstanding Teachers Awards. Much of her work focuses on the struggle for women in developing countries to gain a political voice, and her research shows how militaries and governments and corporations shape women's lives. She has studied militarization in Malaysia, Philippines, Japan, Britain, and Guyana. She's written many books. I just love the titles of Cynthia's books. Among them are Does Khaki Become Her? The Militarization of Women's Lives, or Bananas, Beaches, and Bases, Making Feminist Sense of International Politics. Or how about The Morning After? Sexual Politics at the End of the Cold War. Cynthia is currently exploring ways in which militarization continues to operate in post-war societies and is tracing the thinking and strategies of women activists, yay, in those societies as they attempt to create cultures and policies that challenge the ongoing militarization. I asked Cynthia what made her start on this path of study, and she said she confessed that she's a daughter of a U.S. Army Air Corps veteran, and she learned from him about World War II when he served as a commando surgeon in Burma. Please welcome Cynthia.
The way in which militarism happens, and I use a kind of long word, militarization, and the reason I use that word is because of the ization parts. Like socialization and industrialization. Well, ization, as awkward as it is to say, in fact reminds us that it's a process. And it's a process that goes on person by person, town by town, government by government, organization by organization. And it's a hopeful term, is militarization. The hopefulness of it is that you can stop it. That is, if it's just militarism, then it sounds as though it comes to you on a Tuesday morning and there's nothing you can do about it. Or it comes to a government all at once because of one election. That's actually not how it works. Militarization creeps in. It insinuates itself into political parties, into hometowns, into universities who think they have to depend on defense money, into the psyches of people who think the only way they can prove their manhood is by joining the military. It is a creepy process, militarization is. And that's why it is so effective. And that's why it takes so many brain cells to watch it. And that's why it takes so many voices to say, stop. This is the path you're on. Now, that militarization process does not happen in the same way for women as it does for men. And this has to be really taken seriously. You cannot militarize a man unless you can militarize his mother. You cannot militarize a veteran, a male veteran coming home, unless you can militarize his wife or his girlfriend. That is, for all the people here in the room who have been militarized and then tried to reverse it, and my guess is that's all of you. You know how hard it is to reverse the militarization of your mind and of your reputation and of your job skills and of your voting. It is hard to reverse militarization. Militarization happens because a lot of women are persuaded it's best for you. Look at the most recent Pentagon recruiting ads. Now, I should tell you, you've got to be careful about your post office because the Pentagon has gotten much more sophisticated. They have marketing people working for them, of course. And they have independent ad agencies. A lot of ad agencies are deeply militarized because it's a very lucrative advertising account to get the Pentagon advertising account. But they've gotten very sophisticated now, and they put their advertising recruiting literature now, not just in any old post office. Some of us here in the room come from Cambridge, right across the river. No advertising there. Really, I do a lot of my research in post offices, right? Because I collect recruiting ads, right? To see how women and how men are presented in the ads to lure them into thinking that the military is the only way to get a decent education. That the military is the only way to prove you're a first-class citizen. That the military is the only way to prove your manhood. The military is the only way to prove you're a liberated woman. Right? So I follow recruiting ads. But down in Key West, Florida, they think they have a much better chance of recruiting young people. And so in the Key West post office, which of course I also visited to do research, that's the only reason I was in Key West. But I went and the Pentagon now puts out its recruiting literature both in Spanish and in English. This started especially during the wars in Central America. And they had a recruiting ad very prominently displayed that had two sides to it. The first side was a young man that you were to imagine was a young Hispanic American man. And he was looking at the camera and saying how proud he was to serve in the military. And then on the accompanying photograph that was part and parcel of the same ad was the picture of a 50-something supposedly Hispanic woman. And she was looking right at the camera and said how proud she was of her son now. The Pentagon knows a thing or two about motherhood. The Pentagon knows that women who are mothers worry about their son's manhood. That women who are mothers worry about their son's adulthood. As a woman in upstate New York said to an interviewer not long ago, I'm a single parent. I'm a single mom. I'm raising a teenage boy, and he's become a couch potato. I've never wanted him, she told the interviewer. I've never wanted him to join the military. That's not the future I actually looked forward for him. I want him to go to a state college. I want him to get a job that has skills that will make him a useful young person. But he's become a couch potato. He sits here in the living room, he can't get a job, we don't have enough money for him even to go to the local community college. And I don't know what to do. And when the recruiter came along and promised that his joining the military would help me be an effective single mom, because it would help me get him to achieve some of the things I want for him, especially that he'll become mature, that he'll become a real adult. He'll get off the couch and become a man. And she said to the interviewer, I took a deep sigh and I said, okay. I need another parent, and if the military is going to be the other parent, I accept. That's called a recruiter's day in heaven. So militarization does not happen just of men. And it doesn't just happen of women in the same way it happens to men. The only way we're going to be able to stop the kind of militarization that makes us as a country so susceptible to a militarized foreign policy. And that's not just of this administration. It's going to be of the next administration or 2 administrations from now. It's a big mistake, I think, to think that the George W. Bush administration is really, really peculiar. It is an extreme version of a lot of other American administrations. And I say this as somebody who's going to vote for Kerry. In political life, you make distinctions, but that doesn't mean you ignore the commonalities. And the commonalities are the things that go on in our heads, in our neighbors' heads, in our relatives' heads, in our workmates' heads. And those are ideas that feed militarization. And one of the most powerful ideas is about proving masculinity. One of the great advantages of now having so many feminist observers of U.S. foreign policy and of the U.S. military as an institution is that we are now having to take masculinity seriously. And we're going to have to take it seriously inside of peace organizations as well. And this is tough to do. It's particularly tough when you think that as a peace organization, you feel as though you're yourself under siege. You feel as though you're such a small minority. You feel as though your voice isn't being heard. How can we possibly take time out, use our precious energy to talk about masculinity as it operates inside our own organization? But you know what? We have to do that. We have to actually act as though women's experiences of the privileging of masculinity, including inside of peace organizations, matters. It's not trivial. So things change as well as stay the same. And finally, listen to women here at home who don't look as though they're veterans. Be curious, all of us. Be curious about every woman who is supposed to take care of either psychologically, as Howard said, or physically wounded person who comes back from Iraq or Afghanistan. Listen to the girlfriend. Listen to the fiancé. Listen to the mother. Listen to the wife. And don't do it out of sort of Fox News sentimentality. Listen because you think that's the only way we're going to actually understand how militarization works its way through women's and men's lives in ways that makes it persistent. Take the women's lives seriously. Let's be smarter. Let's stop militarization everywhere. Thank you.
You know, in the mid-50s, he served in the Marine Corps as a rifle platoon leader, operations officer, and company commander. Following the military, he went to work for the Rand Corporation as an analyst. The Pentagon, under Secretary of State Defense, Robert McNamara, remember him? Served 2 years in Vietnam with the State Department evaluating pacification on the front lines. These and other experiences of government deception led Daniel on a painful quest for the truth and what he should do about it. This fact-finding and soul-searching journey resulted in his decision to risk his career and his personal freedom to copy and release to the public what has become known as the Pentagon Papers. And we are all grateful to you for that. Welcome, Veterans for Peace members.
waiting for applause as various parts of my career were unfolding in front of you. The Rand Corporation in silence, you know. And actually, I used to shudder when I used to get introduced during the war. They would go through all that. Marine Corps Company Commander, which I think deserves a applause. Marine Corps Company Commander, it's very good. But somehow, you know, what is he doing here, you know? It's not entirely cliche that we hear all the time. That we have here in this room, not just because we're veterans, a band of brothers and sisters, because we are veterans who turned, who changed. How many here, well, I won't ask for hands, but when we talk about lies our fathers told or lies of whoever told, how many of us here, I'm asking rhetorically, did not share the experience of believing a lot of lies at some point in our lives? When we went in, surely we went in for a variety of reasons, but among them, in almost every case, was a kind of credulity about what we were hearing, what we learned from our mothers and fathers and everybody, that the people in this room grew out of. We're hearing here about a woman who wanted her son to become a man. Now, he saw such a mother in Michael Moore's film, and most of you have probably seen Fahrenheit 9/11. And her particular motive, she actually encouraged, remember, her boy to go in to get the education, which is exactly why Lindy England, the young woman who we've seen in the photographs now with a cigarette dangling from her mouth, pointing derisively at the genitals of a naked Iraqi under her control. She went in, and others went in, because they couldn't get a job at the Walmart, or they wanted an education, was their only way in. So they were recruited by those recruiting posters. The recruiting posters themselves are not entirely lies. Especially in the Army, I've told, it is a pretty good way to get an education for a lot of people in ROTC and so forth that they don't have otherwise. Except the woman in the movie saw her son come back in a body bag, which is one of the things that happens to young men in wars. So he fulfilled that right of manhood, pro patria mori, to die for the country. He got a chance to go through that ritual of initiation, and she got him back that way, not going to school. Now lots of others, of course, see their sons go to school, or their daughters go to school. But more than one will see their daughter come back as a torturer, like Lindy England. Be all that you can be. Recruiters don't quite say that, do they, the posters? You didn't know you could be a torturer. Peculiar aspect to that torture. Why did they use Lindy England to do this particular game? Because they found that nothing was so demoralizing. This was scientifically found by experiment and experience. If you want to break an Iraqi down, to tell you to betray his friends, and that, by the way, is the most that most of these people in the prison could do. If they're going to give anything, they weren't part of Al-Qaeda, they weren't part of the resistance, and most of them, some of them are criminals, most of them were just picked up. What's the most they could do when they're dipped in the water by Americans? Their heads to water and they're near drowning, or they're beaten, they're shot, they're sodomized, their children are sodomized. They can give the names of their friends. That's the information. Big deal. So they can go in and they can be sodomized and dipped in the water by the waterboard technique, put under hoods and so forth. How do you get them to do that? What our CIA has learned 40 years ago, 50 years ago, about how torture came into use in 3 democracies. England's use of torture in Northern Ireland, Israel's use of torture against the Palestinians, and the use of torture in this man's hometown where I was born, Chicago. How did it come about? Why did the torturers do it? What was their rationale? What were the methods they used? How did the victims react? How did it affect their lives? He goes through all the different aspects of it. What was the reaction of the press, the clergy, the judges, the jurors, everything? What happened to the torturers? I won't summarize all of it. I'll just say all this is covered. It's all very relevant to us because torture is a disease that has entered this society now. And it didn't start in Iraq, as he shows in his chapter on Chicago.
That's right.
He answers the question which has been in my mind for the last 2 months. What's going on in those prisons where these prison guards came from? Lindy England's lover, by whom she has a child. Lindy England's lover, one of the few by whom she's pregnant, on court, she's being court-martialed. Another one of the 7 who was facing court-martial was a prison guard, who actually was fired, as I understand it, for abusive behavior even in his prison. How much of that is there? It's time for us to learn a lot more about that, for sure. But, rather than that, we are in now we live in a society whose military, like the French in Algeria, the British in Northern Ireland, the Israelis, and many others, the Greeks, who had been a democracy before 1967, recruited, trained, used torturers, and torture entered their society, and it never stays overseas. That means that the people who are going to be interned here for the next terrorist attack that we have to predict are going to be tortured. Does if we succeed in turning over most security operations to Iraqis under a thug and torture, Alawi, the present supposed prime minister there, a long-time CIA man, and formerly a Saddam Hussein man, who's killed people personally and so forth. So if to the extent we turn over, quote, sovereignty to him, is torture going to reduce? No, I think what's been learned from this, by Rumsfeld, I'm sure, and the others, is that torture is now to be done by Iraqis, and without cameras, of course, if possible, but it's going to be Iraqi torture by the people we pay and hire and train and so forth, as it has been for the last half century and more. In El Salvador, in Honduras, in Guatemala, in all these countries where our torture has been done for us by people that American advisors have advised, and to some degree, to a large degree, brought into power, and torture is at the end of it. Death squads are things we have supported, paid for, organized, advised. I think death squads are in the future for Iraq while we're there, and of course, not only us. I'm saying it happens not only in democracies and not only in places we advise by any means, but we have been torturing people for a long time in our informal empire. The move of the neocons toward a direct empire where we occupy, we run, we have a military government in Iraq, which is a different form of empire, did have a vulnerability, and that was the vulnerability that our torturers had video cameras and they sent stuff home on the internet to their parents and their girlfriends, and some of it came out. That's the difference. And we see Americans doing the torturing. But what did that follow? That followed the United States of America in full sight of the world undertaking an aggressive war. An invasion, an occupation that was as imperialistic, as aggressive as Saddam's invasion of Kuwait, or the Japanese invasion of Manchuria and China and elsewhere. Dare I say Hitler? No, because that's the, if you say Hitler, you're ruled out as an extremist. That's an analogy not to be applied, but I'm not talking about the Holocaust. In this case, I'm talking just about the invasion of Poland and France. And actually, our invasion of Iraq was militarily modeled on Guderian's attack into Blitzkrieg into France. I recognized that as immediately. In my Marine days, I used to study military history, and I said, that's Guderian's rule book. They were following there. Move, 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 get ahead of your supplies, don't worry about your flanks, get there, go right to the heart, and so forth. Fast, Blitzkrieg. I must say I was a little surprised that our DOD adopted the term blitzkrieg. I thought they wouldn't do that. But along with the Nazi helmets that they put in, which surprised me a little bit, those of you who don't know what I mean, World War II veterans, what the hell are they doing with that helmet? But likewise with the word blitzkrieg. No, it's okay now. Just like empire is okay, aggression is okay, etc., etc. Preventive war is okay. We are in a very dark moment when we have the possibility, I would say, in the next few months, of some decisive activity, which I haven't heard yet. I hope in this conference that we talk about that. Nothing we do, by the way, nothing that the whole country can do can guarantee Bush being removed from power. I think those people do not want to be removed from power. They are not planning to be removed from power, and by votes or anything else. And I think we're facing a situation here where what did amount considerably something like a coup involving the Supreme Court last time, and various unconstitutional or questionably pushing the borders obviously of legitimacy. We're heading toward a time where it won't be an ambiguous question at all, possibly at all. If there is another big terrorist attack before the election, then I think that does two things. I think that elects Bush. I don't think we can really avoid that very much, although what I'm going to ask you to do and urge you to do is to be acting now to reduce the possibility that guarantees Bush an election. But I think actually the odds are very much against us. It's a matter of reducing the probability a little bit. So I have to hope very much that Osama does not come through for Bush and pull off this terrorist attack before the election. Now that's not a joke, because at all, because the Tom Paine ad of Osama bin Laden looking like Uncle Sam and saying, "I want you to invade Iraq." The invasion of Iraq was the fulfillment of Osama bin Laden's highest dream. It couldn't do better for him. And the attack, the aggression against a Muslim country like that, which was in no supporter of his, in fact, this was an enemy of his, and always had been, meant that his recruiting was now assured. Every day that we invade, every day we occupy, every week we continue to occupy, and do what occupation involves against resistance. Not that torture really works, it just done. It doesn't work very well, except in very limited tactical senses. It loses the war for you, but it'll happen. It goes along with occupation. And a lot of other things, the killing of civilians, everything that's happening there. Recruits for Osama bin Laden worldwide, in places as far away as the Philippines and Indonesia, in a way that nothing else could. It's hard to imagine a president who could be better for Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda is a serious danger to us now. We have created enemies by our policies which Al-Qaeda, for which Osama bin Laden is able certainly to recruit and exploit and mobilize and use very effectively. So we're facing a real danger in a way that was not true domestically ever through the Cold War. There was a growing danger to which we contributed enormously of the nuclear arms race. Our policies helped grow the Soviet force, and we knew that, and we did it year after year, to a point where it could destroy the world just the way we can. But aside from that, the communists domestically were no more a real threat to this country or anywhere else than the Jews were to Germany. And they weren't even, of course the Jews weren't even organized, but the communists weren't organized. That was an illusory threat. Al-Qaeda is not an illusory threat. And Bush is Osama's candidate for life for Al-Qaeda. In every respect, he is serving the interests of that, meaning he is making this country more endangered. A significant danger is being made worse every day. I would like to hear Kerry saying that. He's not saying that. There's a lot of things. Kerry saying a lot of things.